I would say the brilliance of the BBC, it was designed um, as an institution that would be fairer and offer truth and fairness to a British audience and subsequently to a worldwide audience with a worldwide news network. And in many ways, American television was built on that standard. And so giving that trust up, giving that opportunity up, I think would be a mistake.
How do they restructure emotionally? How do they recapture the minds of the United Kingdom to say, you can trust us? It's been shattered with this debate with President Trump folks suggesting he will sue the BBC for many billions of dollars. Howard Stringer, what is the first step to rekindle a new trust with the British?
Well, I think with all great institutions, leadership is critical, and presumably there will be discussions about who runs the BBC now very quickly, and how the board is constructed, and lessons will be learned. I think that's been true across
Right.
the board. When I was at CBS News, we were under attack by the government. I had conversations in a lawsuit with General Westmoreland, and before that, I had conversations with Presidents Nixon and Reagan. That news division is only a part of the BBC, but news divisions are always the threat to politicians, and politicians tend to dislike you if you suggest they're wrong. And so the BBC has always been had a reputation for fairness. Now it's under attack now, and I think lessons will be learned regardless of what we feel about it. But the BBC is very important to global democracy, and I think President Trump knows that.
Howard Stringer with us. Sir Howard Stringer, folks, this morning here with all of his work with Sony and CBS News over the years. We welcome all of you, and particularly the United Kingdom this morning with the uproar over the BBC. Paul Sweeney, with Sir Howard.
Howard, how does the BBC, how is it positioned in the UK today in the media, overall media landscape? Maybe how has that changed over time?
Well, I think it's misunderstood or dimly perceived in the U.S. After all, I spent most of my life in America. I worked 30 years at CBS, but but today the BBC still has the top-rated entertainment broadcast in a way that would be CBS today would be proud, or NBC would be proud. I mean, before Christmas, the top 10 programs on television in England were BBC programs. But this story is about news. News is always the catalyst for politicians who disagree with opinions that they perceive to be either unfair or inappropriate. That was true when I was at CBS, and it's true in England today. So it's a lesson for both sides. If you're going to deal with presidents or deal with issues, you have got to be fair, and you've got to have the audience believe in the institution that you represent. And for many years, the BBC was a byword for trust and fairness around the world.
Right.
Worldwide news, the BBC operation, is the most trusted globally. And I've had people call me many times in the last few weeks and saying, protect us because we watch the BBC, because nothing else works for us in wherever country they're calling from. So the president of the United States has observed a moment that is a challenge to the BBC News operation, which I think they understand and accept. And apologies should maybe have been offered earlier.
Earlier, right.
But I think the BBC knows what its responsibilities are.
Howard, do you believe that the damages being sought by President Trump are reasonable, or how do you think about that side?
I think it's reasonable, but I also think that President Trump knows Britain very well. I knew him personally, and he was very generous to me. And suing the BBC is sending a message that be fair, be true to yourself. whether or not England will pay $1 billion, I doubt that they will, and I doubt that President Trump really wants that. I think he wants the BBC in a funny kind of a way to behave.
We welcome all of you worldwide on YouTube, our new digital distribution, and of course on radio from our various sources, 99.1 FM in Washington, 92.9 FM in Boston, Bloomberg 1130 in New York. Sir Howard Stringer with us this morning with his decades of work. You heard him speak of General Westmoreland there, what takes us as far back. Just to give you a little vignette, Sir Howard Stringer at a very young age answering telephones backstage for the Ed Sullivan Show.
Oh,
this goes back a few decades. Sir Howard, let me ask a delicate question of the United Kingdom. The present beleaguered and resigned leader of the BBC is perceived as a marketing guy. You were in the New York Times talking about this. How does the BBC get back to the intensity you're speaking about? Do they have to find a world-class journalist to drive forward?
Well, I think that the mistakes that were made, which have been presented accumulatively, gives a mistaken impression that there's something institutionally wrong with the BBC News. These were mistakes that have now been acknowledged and should have been acknowledged earlier. But I don't think there's anything about the BBC that should be suspect. I think the BBC, like Britain, is an astonishing ally of the United States and an important one. And I think the President of the United States knows that. In my dealings with him, I think he knew it, and he was always fair and generous. I think he's fired a shot across the brows of the BBC. They will pay attention. They are made changes, and that will be good. But the BBC is an important global institution, and I don't believe you stop breaking up great institutions during a crisis.
I look, Sir Howard, just one final question, if we could, in the BBC, and we must turn to so much going on in Paul Sweeney's world in New York as well. And talking to our Eric Larson off our desk on Queen Victoria Street, and looking at the litigation here as well, how will that play out in the United Kingdom? Inform our American audience of how a lawsuit in London is different than a lawsuit wherever in the United States.
I'm not sure I really understand that question.
Well, I mean, the litigation's going to be in the United Kingdom. How is it different there if the president sues the BBC than it would be here?
Well, I was sued in America, as you remember, over the General Westmoreland thing, and it went on for years. And I don't think President Trump will keep at this. I think he is much bigger fish to fry. I think he has sent a very important message. I think the BBC will respond accordingly, and I hope he doesn't expect the British public to pay that kind of money. I think his generosity will save the day.
Sir Howard Stringer with us, folks. Thrilled to have him with us this morning. Let me migrate, Sir Howard, to the United States and ask a question that so many will resonate with so much of our listeners and viewers. Could Dan Rather do the news today?
Does Dan Rather what?
Could he do the news today? Could Dan Rather grind out his leadership in news off the desk of CBS as he did years ago? Could he do that in this environment today?
Well, he can't do it now. I mean, he's still in good shape. The last time I spoke to him, and I spoke to him quite recently, but no, I don't think he would want to become an anchorman in his 90s, and I don't want to become a director general in my 80s either. But I think so much has changed in America. It's been fractionalized, and the networks aren't as strong as they used to be. When I was running the evening news, we had a 26 share of the news compared to ABC 20 and NBC 20. That combined audience was almost 70% of the national audience. That isn't possible in the United States today because of the fractionalization and the growth of competitive social media. So, another Dan Rather is likely to be unlikely, but I am not watching
Right.
from a distance all the current anchormen, and I don't know anyone will ever have the power of Walter and Dan again, or Tom Brokaw and
Right.
Roger Mudd and so forth. It's just the nature of the world. It's changing. But I think retaining some of the values, and the values that are most important are trust and honesty. And as long as we abide by those, and the BBC resurrects its reputation by concentrating on what it does best, we'll survive this, just as CBS did survive General Westmoreland.
Sir Howard, you, from your years at Sony Corporation, a major global media and entertainment company, what do you make of the landscape now? So much has changed with Netflix and streaming and so on and so forth. How do you feel like some of these traditional large global media companies like Sony, like the Walt Disney Company, like Warner Brothers, how do you think that landscape shakes out here?
That's $1 billion question. Unfortunately, it is a $1 billion question. Money plays a much bigger role than it used to. There were 3 networks, and then Rupert Murdoch built up Fox, so there were 4 networks. And now it's scattered and so forth, and people get what they want. But I think keeping solidarity and solidity at the center of the core institutions, you will find an audience, just as movies do. So I'm not prone to despair. I keep myself amused today doing radio dramas, and I still reach people in America and England. So I don't think there's plenty of good material. It's just not as concentrated as it used to be. But you can't look at the past. As somebody once said, the past is a foreign country, and they did things differently there.
Sir Howard, so going forward here, I mean, it's interesting. The world's changed so much in terms of delivering content to consumers. Consumers can now get anything they want, whenever they want, wherever they want. Is this a better world for consumers and content, do you believe?
Well, I think it's more complicated because so many choices are a bit confusing, and so truth becomes a little more obscure as people listen to whoever they listened to yesterday. They switch to somebody else today. So I think our customers are maybe a bit confused, but we still have to provide great content, and people will find it. People will watch it. And I saw the other day a new movie about Shakespeare as a young man and his family, and I thought, well, there's a lot of talent in America, and it still will attract an audience. So breathe a sigh of relief and keep on trying.